It's not meant for us. Hello, and welcome to Visions of the Past. My name is Andrew, and I'm the host of this Assassin's Creed lore podcast. This is episode 32, and today we're going to talk about what Bayek was talking about during Khaliset's final moments, the Empirical Truth. What is this empirical truth, I hear you ask? It is defined by Merriam-Webster as exact conformity as learned by observation or experiment between judgments, or propositions and externally existent things in their actual status and relations. It can also be called actual truth or contingent truth. Within Assassin's Creed, though, it is a series of messages found within Assassin's Creed Origins. It is also known as sapere aude, a Latin phrase that means dare to know, but is sometimes translated as dare to be wise. The empirical truth messages were found sometime around 48 BC by the Magi Bayek, although they were originally intended for Layla Hassan, who would relive Bayek's genetic memories in 2017. Each of the 6 messages were delivered by a different messenger and were located in ancient Isu temples, most of which had Egyptian tombs built on top of them by the time Bayek had found them. I'm not going to read each message word for word, as that can get rather dry, but I will say where you can find each message, the name of the Isu vault it is in, and give a general summary of the message and what it means for the series lore. The first message is in the vault Un Ma'a Nai Rasut, which roughly translates from Egyptian to mean reality of dreams. It is located under the tomb of Amos Ankh in the isolated desert. It was recorded 91 days after the Great Catastrophe by a member of the Isu identified as the Amun Amunet messenger. The first part of the message asks Layla how real everything around her is, and because Layla has experienced the bleeding effect, how can she know what is real and what is not? After stating that it took thousands of simulations to find Desmond, and that each of them felt very real, the messenger asks if there were any way to know what is truly real, because anything can be simulated. And finding the answer could mean erasing something from existence. The message then references a few people who have asked this question, and asks Layla what she would choose if she truly knew, if she even wanted to understand, stating that simulations are not meaningless, and that there is a purpose. But the question isn't whether or not you're in a simulation, but how much of your free will is actually your own. The last part of the message talks about how the computer program Eliza was able to pass the Turing test, and explains how the test does not determine whether you are consciousness or part of the code, and ends with asking Layla, how does that make you feel? This message feels like a warning about simulations, like the Animus, and like the simulations that the Isu ran to view future probabilities, about how dangerous they are and how real they feel. It even hints at things like the bleeding effect and not being able to know what's real and what isn't. The second message is located in the vault of Seshem F. At, under the tomb of Tefibi III in the Black Desert, and it roughly translates from Egyptian to mean, lead him to truth. It was recorded 93 days after the Great Catastrophe by a member of the Isu identified as the Nomarch messenger. The message talks about how language is the key to mutual understanding, that the Isu listened to our times and learned, which allowed them to exchange words with people in the modern day. The message breaks down what lies within language, everything from emotions to lies, stating it's the syntax in which we describe our lives, our surroundings. But even with that, our mastery of the code as language is grossly underdeveloped. Even though the messenger is not surprised, they go on to explain that the code makes up equations that define life. It is nestled deep within everything, and is an intricate yet simple language that exists in the framework of time itself. The code is the one rule that applies to everyone and everything, a bridge between humans and the Isu. The code is a language that can be read, and it tells of what was, what is, and what will be. It is one the Isu can read and humans cannot. The message then transitions into talking about time and how time is the code, and says humans are just now starting to scratch the surface of reading this code to uncover the truth. It continues by saying, to the untrained eye, time looks like paths and nodes, but the Isu see it like a chalkboard covered in calculus. If humans were able to see like the Isu did, they'd be able to learn about other simulations, about the genesis of who the humans came to be, and about space and its fluidity. The message ends with a statement that time is the language which all existence is made of. The second message explains the differences between how the Isu and the humans viewed time in a broad sense. We know from before Assassin's Creed Origins that the Isu were able to view future probabilities through simulations, and that it was how they could create long-term plans for things like how to avoid the second great catastrophe. In contrast, it says how humans are only being able to scratch the surface of this ability. The way this message comes across, the Isu could run simulations of past events, current events, and future ones, but the humans are only able to view the past via the Animus and other Animus-like devices. The third message is located in the vault Keshesh M. Shesh M. Eneb, under Khufu's tomb, the Great Pyramid of Giza, in the Saqqara Nome. It roughly translates from Egyptian to mean stars and Uraeus and the palace wall. It was recorded 95 days after the Great Catastrophe by a member of the Isu, identified as the Khufu messenger. The messenger tells Layla that it was known that she would be here at this moment, and explains to her how the walls tell the story that the Isu transcribed in the walls of their own structures and their artifacts. It was a story the Isu tried to alter, everyone from scholars to scientists, poets and physicians, but they all failed. They did not know who wrote the stories on the walls, but throughout their simulations, they could not change them. After failing, it was clear to them that they were to become messengers to the humans. They had removed the ability to read the walls from the original human template. The message goes on to talk about how humans cannot understand time outside of the surface level of simply watching it pass, and, because of that, the messenger shows Layla the full story of the walls that she might never read. But something, anything, must change, and Layla doesn't understand what is at stake. The messenger hopes that a future can be created, where a loved one can be revived by creating a new chapter, one where humanity is more than it is today, one where the Isu and the humans can exist together. This third message is another that talks about time, but in this instance, it isn't so much about the code of it. There are points in time that, no matter what simulation the Isu ran, they could not change the outcome, but the messenger hoped there would be a way to change those moments in time, and goes so far as to hypothesize that if they could be changed, then there would be hope to revive the dead. The fourth message is located in the vault Iu Sekdu At, which roughly translates from Egyptian to mean, welcome the builders of metal, great things, truth. It's under Smentkar's tomb in the Harris Nome. The message was recorded 99 days after the Great Catastrophe by a member of the Isu, identified as the Khnum and Heket messenger. The message explains what Desmond did to save the world, and how humanity had no idea, thinking that it would be enough to save mankind, which it was, until it wasn't. It goes on to explain that time will always correct itself, and tells Layla that time works in many ways, but that she can only understand it in two ways, one of which is linear continuity, which is a simulation that allows for variations, but there are also nodes, or moments where algorithms converge into a single moment, where one absolute truth is possible. The paths are fluid and continuous, but the nodes are static and changeless. The messenger explains paths and nodes, and wonders if Layla can feel the current wave collapsing as it tries to correct Desmond's acts. You see, the incoming node needs the world to end. This message states that there are points in time that cannot be changed, and that no matter what happens, there are points in time that will always happen. These moments will always turn out the same way. The fifth message is located in the vault Keneb tu Ka'aye, which roughly translates from Egyptian to mean subjugate them, bend them to our will. It is under the Desheret Desert. It was recorded 105 days after the Great Catastrophe by the Isu known as the Seth Anath messenger. The message begins by saying not everything is perceived the same way by individuals. Some see colors differently or hear higher frequencies. Even though their perceptions shape reality, reality is just a mathematical model that gets solved over and over again by the observer. This message explains thoughts as computations that render the world that you call your own, and that each person sees the world through different variations, and those variations can be subtle or drastic. Perception drives perspective, and your experience is created from what your brain allows you to see and believe. Humans were designed that way by the Isu so that humans could only do what the Isu wanted. The Isu preferred humans to remain blind to some parts of time. The message explains how humans fought for freedom for centuries, but the real cage is not around humanity, but within it. The true cage is in the mind, as it does not allow humanity to wander in uncharted territories. It says how some sounds, unknown by humans, fuel conspiracies, but are actually messages waiting for the compatible observer. The message ends by asking if Schrodinger's cat is dead or alive. The answer depends on what you perceive, and we're told to explore the borders of our reality. The fifth message continues to tie in time as a code and language, but shares that the sixth sense, which is the ability to see time, was denied to humans when created by the Isu. They did this by creating our senses to only perceive specific things. And because we can only perceive so much, our reality is narrower than theirs was. The sixth and final message is located in the vault Esfet Un Ma'apu, which roughly translates from Egyptian to falsehood, reality, whichever, it doesn't matter, which itself is a loose translation of half of the Assassin's Creed, which says, nothing is true. The vault is under the Great Sphinx of Giza in the Saqqara Nome. It only appears after Layla has synced all of Bayek's memories of the stone circles. It was recorded 109 days after the Great Catastrophe by the Isu member known as the Sphinx Messenger. The message starts with the messenger saying that reality will soon cease to be, and that it's time to wake up because the next chapter is unstoppable. However, even the greatest revolutions originated from the confines of impossibility. The messenger then gives Layla 4 directives: change your mind, subvert perspective, stop the world, and bend it into something new. And even though Layla is clearly inferior to the messenger begs her to do something that they could never do, and tells her it is not enough to tell time, that she must learn time, and in doing so escape the inescapable. If she can do this, she'll fill in the blanks that hide between words and between worlds to erase the variables that led to the Isu's destruction. If she can't, she'll face the same destruction. The Isu found solace in order and were tricked into thinking that they were the ones writing the rules when they were just being guided to a conclusion. The messenger goes so far as to tell Layla to take an unexpected turn away from the path that is drawn straight ahead, because she understands the value of disobeying. The message explains the animus was humankind's first unconscious attempt to explain what it could not see, to understand genetic memories as an eye into history. But it has a fatal flaw. It follows the rules from those who embrace order, like the Isu did, allowing one to witness but not alter. However, Layla's animus is different, just like Layla's mind. It could escape the code. It could take that leap and make a decision that defies the order of things that are. The message concludes by telling her to be the chaos that comes to be, and remember that nothing is real. Everything is permitted. The sixth message is the big one. It's the one that not only changes Layla's life, but gives an in-lore explanation on changes made in Odyssey that will probably also be done in Valhalla, but I'll get to that speculation in a minute. The messenger here believes there were things that the Isu missed when looking forward in time, and that to be able to keep humanity from hitting a point where the world would end, that the spaces they could not see needed to be filled, and that the Isu's reliance on order couldn't accomplish this. It would take chaos. This implied that Layla needed to leave Abstergo and instead join the Assassins. The Templars try to bring peace through control, while the Assassins want peace through freedom, which invites chaos. The messenger believes her mind is different than most because she understands the value in disobeying order. The message also states that her animus is different than any that came before. While previous visions of the animus could only view history, hers has the ability to escape the code of time and make a choice that defies the order of things that are. Most of the messages within the Empirical Truth talk about how time being the code of the universe and how the Isu took a sixth sense away from the humans to keep them from viewing time. They explain how humans and Isu are different in this aspect and brings a little more insight on how the Isu were able to look forward into time and humans cannot. It also talks about reality and perception and how everyone sees things just a little differently. This feels like it's meant to shed some light on eagle vision. With a little more Isu DNA, you get a greater ability to see the code. This is how the person with the eagle vision can perceive things that are not perceived by others. The biggest revelation that is brought up is at the end of the final message, when it comes flat out and says that Layla's animus is different and that it could escape the code of time. Layla's animus would make it possible to make decisions that defy the order of things that are. This allows for Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Assassin's Creed Valhalla to introduce choices. It's this little nugget that allows for it within the lore of Assassin's Creed. It also allows for the reports of Layla being brought into the historic map of Assassin's Creed Odyssey to solve animus puzzles, since she is trying to break the code and fill in these spaces the Isu couldn't see. To me, that bit of information feels like Alethea gave Layla some insight to update her animus to do the things that the messengers asked her to do, and that solving these anomalies in the animus will lead to the reading of the node and stop the world from the ending catastrophe that is coming. It could also change things to create a multiverse and branching timelines, or even the return of the Isu. I think the latter is part of Alethea's plan, but that's just my speculation based on not trusting her character. I do think it might be a stretch for Assassin's Creed to touch on branching timelines and a multiverse, as that has the potential to make the lore overly convoluted. It is something that the developers could try to do to start a story that ends with it all re-emerging into one. I do think it's more likely that Assassin's Creed Valhalla will end with the return of at least one Isu to set up future storylines where Layla and this Isu are villains going forward. But this is my speculation, and only time will tell where the story will go. Thank you for joining me today. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for new episodes. If you love Visions of the Past podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. If you have any questions about Assassin's Creed or topics that you'd like me to cover, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at visions_AC, and you can find those links in the show notes. Till next time, my assassin friends, make sure to follow the creed, and to those Templars listening, may the Father of Understanding guide you.